Here, finally, we've got spend the same place. So John and I have always talked tech stuff because we're very techie people. Do you know what techie is? Yeah, see, Jerry does. Yeah. Other people are like, what's that? Well, I've always found it very interesting, and I'm sure, John, you get this too because of your nationality. People look at you like, what are you? People have asked, are you Filipino? I look at them and I say, no, they don't make them in the extra large model. Do you know who Pastor David Shin is? Yes. Okay, I know you know Pastor Shin. When I was a member at Village Church, I was running my own ministry. I wasn't pastoring there, but when I was at Village Church, I remember people would come up to me and they would call me Pastor Shin. We'd get very frustrated. They would call him Pastor Ho. So one time I was asked to preach, so I asked David to come up, and David stood next to me. And I said, for those of you who are confused, this is Pastor Shin. He is Korean. I'm Pastor Ho. I'm Chinese. He eats short grain rice. I eat extra long grain rice. That solved the issue for a while. I got into a taxi when I was doing an evangelistic series in Zambia, and you could see the man, the taxi driver, looked in his rearview mirror, and you could tell he's checking you out. He's trying to figure out what you are. And he says to me, you from China? Yeah. And I said, no, I'm not from China. But you Chinese? Yes, I'm Chinese. But you're not from China? No. Where were you born? Singapore. Oh, so you live in Singapore? No. You know, but you're Chinese? Yes. What's your passport? I said, Canada. Oh, you live in Canada? No. I live in America. He was very confused. He was very happy to drop me off and get me out of there. I remember a number of years ago, when it was still okay, I was passing from Ontario, Canada, back in through Detroit, and there was a guy at the border when I was coming through with my Canadian passport. He looked, he said, passport, so I handed him the passport. He's on his computer working. And he says, what were you doing in Canada? I said, I was preaching. And he looked at passport. He says, and what do you do in America? I had a moment of cheekiness, which now could probably land you in jail. I looked at him and I said, I'm a missionary to the heathen Americans. He literally looked at me. He looked at me over his readers. He closed my passport and he literally threw it in my car onto the other side of the car. And he said, get out of here. Don't mess with these guys. So some people wanted to know a little bit about my family. So I'll show you. This is my family. My wife is standing next to me, and then my son is on the far left. That's Austin. He lives in Cleveland, Ohio. He is the director of video for a food specialty studio.
I want to do something real quick. That light doesn't need to be on.
Oh, you're going to undo it?
Yeah, yeah.
It's deflecting off the screen. It's just too bright.
You're still going to bring the light up. You're such a bright guy. Thank you. All right, so my son is the director of video for Food Specialty Studio. And so if you see an Olive Garden commercial, Outback Steakhouse, Popeyes, Firehouse, he does all the videography for that. He doesn't do the food. That's all done by other specialists, but he handles that. And then his wife, Christina, works for Cleveland Clinic as a registered nurse. And then immediately to my right is Ian, married to one of our identical twins, Madison. He's a lineman. She is working on her master's in school psychology. She's actually doing her internship right now, and they live in Northeast Texas. And when you pastor, when you have children, you kind of just drop them on along the way. They kind of are a payload. So you pastored last year, you leave them there. We actually had to leave our son in Michigan when we came down to Texas. And then on the far right is Ben, and he's doing some teaching. And his wife, Lauren, our daughter, is also a teacher. She was teaching kindergarten, and I think this year she's going to be doing 6th grade. And it was interesting. She was the last one to get married. So when she called us, she said, guess where Ben's parents go to church? And I'm thinking, how many churches can there be in North America? And I said, I don't know. Tell me where. He says, his parents are actually members at Granite Bay Church, which is where Amazing Facts is at. So I thought, well, this is wonderful. It makes it very convenient. So let's back up a little bit more. I was born in Singapore. Before I was 2 years old, my parents decided to immigrate to Toronto, Canada. And so that's where I grew up. It's always interesting when people come to me and they say, your English is very good. Well, you know, I know English, I know some French, I know some Korean, and a little spotty things of Chinese. People said, do you speak Chinese? I said, no, but I can eat Chinese for sure. So now, I grew up in the church. I want to make that very clear. I grew up in a Seventh-day Adventist home. I did not go to an Adventist school. I went through public school all the way through. Perhaps you've heard this, or perhaps you've even used the phrase that the kids in the church school are no better than the kids in the public school. Have you heard that? Yeah. That's what my parents said to me. Now, when I was 5.5 years old, my parents enrolled me in piano lessons. So I started piano at 5.5. And then when I hit the 3rd grade, now I played piano with the same teacher, Filipino lady, all the way through for 13 years, all the way from 5 to 18. When I was in the 3rd grade in public school, I actually was chosen to sing for Queen Elizabeth II and Duke of Edinburgh in a special choir. We moved again, and by the time we moved this next time, there was no choir, and I took up string instruments, and I picked up the violin. So I played the violin for grade 4, 5, and 6. Moved again. Now I'm in junior high, 7th grade. The music teacher said to me, well, you're a pianist, right? I said, well, yeah. She says, so you should be able to pick up anything. What do you want to play? And I looked around and I thought, that big shiny instrument right there, the tuba. I said, I want to play that. She says, okay, but you have to take it home every day to practice.
Oh dear.
No. Because you have to understand, when I was in give you some idea. When I was in the 9th grade, I weighed in for wrestling class, and I was 105 pounds in 9th grade, okay? 7th grade, I looked around and I thought, no, I'm not going to do that, so I picked the smallest case. What do you think that is? The flute. I didn't know what it was, and I said, what's this? She says, the flute. Now, stereotype in my mind says, girls, girls, girls. No, I'm not picking the flute. So the next instrument was the clarinet. And I said, what's this? She says, the clarinet. I opened it up, looked at it, and I thought, okay, I'll play that. So I took it home. No fingering chart. She gave me a read. I came back the next day, and I had already figured out how to put it together. I was already figured out the fingering, and I was already playing music. I was self-taught. By the time I was 16 in the 11th grade, the academy music teacher called me and said, we've got some students that want to learn to play clarinet and saxophone. Would you come and teach them? And so at 16, I had 7 students I was teaching clarinet and saxophone to. That was kind of the impetus of what I wanted to do, because I thought, okay, I want to be able to become a piano tuner. I thought that would be kind of cool, piano tuner. But then somewhere between I grew up in Toronto, Canada, so there's 13 grades there for high school, okay? So you have here freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. What do you do with the grade 13? We call it super senior. So I was a super senior. I guess who's the lady here that's 100? Is that? Yeah. So you're a super senior. Okay? You're only 9. Oh, I'm sorry. Forgive me. You're only 99. Okay.
She's a kid.
Yeah. Wow. So at that point, I was getting used to what Adventist schools was, because I went for grade 13 to an Adventist academy, Kingsway College in Oshawa, Ontario. And through that, I decided, forget the piano tuning. I want to become a music teacher. So I went to Union College to study. It was a triple major. It was kind of music education, piano, voice, and clarinet. What I didn't know is the limitations of college. So the music director decided to just load me up. Do you remember your college days? How many credits is considered a full load? 12 to 16 is a full load. 5, 6 classes. I had 13 classes, and I was at 21.5 credits. That was a lot. I was in the select choir, I was in the mass choir, I was principal chair clarinet for the symphony, I was the pianist for the voice teachers, so they basically threw the music up and I had to play it like I've been playing it all my life. I was burnt out because I had 2 credits of piano, which means 20 hours a week you have to practice. I was so burnt out with it. I had a friend that came in and Julie said to me, "Why don't you go as a student missionary?" I said, I'm not listening. I'm practicing. Got to practice. And she said, "Alden, you take a year off of school." And I thought, what? Where do I sign up? So I just signed up. I'm going to go as a student missionary. So I thought, where do I go? I looked through the call book from the North American Division. And I thought, I would like to go to China. I would like to learn a little bit about my ancestry. So I looked up CH. No CH. China was not listed. Somebody said, what about Japan? And I said, no, they're not even close to Chinese. Totally different culture. Somebody said Thailand. No, they're totally different. Then someone said Korea. Oh. My mind was going through the geography maps and I started thinking, oh, Korea is actually a peninsula off of China. You know what I found out? Korean formal writing is actually in Chinese. Did you know that? Koreans are really Chinese. They don't know it. They are. Because their formal writing, they can read it all in Chinese. They know exactly what it was. So I said, I'm going to Korea. Now we all gathered at the end of the year. John, I remember you were in Heritage Singers, right? Now I remember that, do you remember the group Harvest Celebration that came out? Harvest was like in competition with Heritage, not as good, but they were, and that came out of Union College. Now I never told this story, but since Pastor John's here, I thought I was singing in the very highbrow Union airs. The music director says, none of you will try out for Harvest Celebration. If you do, you're out. I said, okay, so everybody's hands off. So when the school year was done, I gave them a call. I said, hey, I'd like to audition, please. School year was done. So I auditioned. They said, yes, we want you. Can you come and tour with us as a bass? And I said, no. What? Why? I said, because I'm leaving for Korea in 30 days. I just wanted to see if I could get in. So I left to Korea. All the student missionaries gathered in Los Angeles, and we got on a Korean airline, and we flew. There was a bunch of us because this is where the training was, and when we were flying, somebody came up to me, I don't remember who, and they said, hey, Alden, what are you teaching for your Bible class? I looked at them and said, I don't have a Bible class. They said, you're going to Korea, right? I said, yeah. They said, you have a Bible class. I said, no, I don't. They said, yes, you do. No, I don't. Somewhere I missed that in the contract. You see, I was baptized at 12, but like many people, I didn't go through Bible studies. You ready for baptism? Okay, go through the waters of baptism. I didn't know my Bible very well. So they said to me, well, go see Elder Dick Barron. Do you remember that name? Yes. So I went. Dick Barron didn't fit in the economy section. He had to go in first class. So I went to first class to see Elder Barron. He stood up and looked down on me. He says, what? I said, Elder Barron, they said that I have to teach a Bible class. I don't have to teach a Bible class, do I? And he looked at me and says, why, Alden, you're going to Korea. You have to teach a Bible class. You know what a hijacker is? I thought about hijacking the plane. Get it back. I'm not going to teach a Bible class. I get to Korea, not happy about this Bible class thing. I am teaching my English class. Now, in Korea, you teach 5 English classes, and the students pay for that. Then they get 1 one Bible class that they can practice their English in. That's how they converse, and that's how they learn about Adventist doctrines. So I had my first Bible class. The students were seated in like a letter C or U. First student right there, right off the get-go, nails me with a question. I didn't know how to answer him. I mean, I didn't know my Bible. I mean, I knew, I had 3 verses kind of memorized. You know, the one that starts like, that's the one, in the beginning. I had that one memorized. And then the other one was for, what was that? Yeah, that's the other one I had memorized. And then the third one, I don't need any help, I got that one. Jesus wept. Jerry, how'd you know that? So I had those under my belt. So when he asked me these questions, they didn't fit into the realm of my 3 verses. So I ran out of the classroom. I ran to my friend's classroom and I said, look, this guy's asking me questions. What do I tell him? I was quite excitable back then. And my friend calmed me down and says, look, just study it and tell him you'll answer it tomorrow. What a novel idea. So I studied it. And the next day, I bequeathed him of all my knowledge. I said, do you understand? He says, yes. I said, wonderful. Then he hit me with another one. So I went and studied. Every day, this guy would do this to me. And I'm thinking, man, I need him out of my class. After 2 months, he's gone. Re-enrolled, new set of classes. He's back again. I really think the Lord put him there for a reason. Month after month, this happened. Then one time, he started asking me a question, and I was about to say, I don't know. And you know what happened? My mouth started moving. I'm looking at my mouth. I'm looking at him. He's going like this. My mouth is moving still. And I said, when my mouth got done, I looked at him and I said, do you understand? And he says, yes. I said, wonderful. Tell me what I just said. Because you see, for the very first time in my life, God had spoken through my mouth, and I didn't know. When you study, God will put things in your mind, especially for the last days, when you're called before kings and queens, you've got to be able to understand. But the Lord will bring those things forward for you. But it's like a computer hard drive. If you don't put anything on that hard drive, you're not going to get anything out of that hard drive. Well, when I was in Korea, it was in a time period where their students were rioting really bad. I brought a camera with me, and I started getting into photography there, and I loved the photojournalism. There were riots between the military and the students, and, you know, Korean students were in their 20s, early 20s. I was 19. They're Korean. I'm Chinese. Do you think I looked like them? Yeah. Do you think I got in trouble? Yeah. I had to show them my card saying, I'm not one of them. They thought I was faking my accent. And I'm like, no, I'm Canadian. I had to show them that. But through that, I thought, I want to become either a Time or a Life photographer. Do you remember those magazines? I don't think they even mail those anymore out. But that's what I wanted to do. And I said, forget it with music. I'm going to Andrews University because they had a photo program. So I was going to enroll at Andrews. I eventually went to Andrews University after my year in Korea and went through the whole program. I graduated. Now, do you know why your parents spend exorbitant amounts of money to send you to an Adventist school?
Find a spouse.
Bingo. That's exactly, who said that? Was that Pastor John? You said that. Did you do that?
I did.
You passed then. You did, okay. So that's the whole point, that you go there. So you find a spouse. I found my spouse also there. We've been married 38 years. And 1 month before, well, just before graduation, I started looking for a job. And I found this job selling pro camera equipment. I interviewed, they said, okay, we want you to start with us. And then 1 month before graduation, I got a phone call saying, I'm sorry, we've had a job merger. We've had a company merger We've merged with another company in Great Britain, so the job is not available anymore. And I thought, oh, what do I do? Because if I don't have a job and I'm on a Canadian visa, I'm head north, young man. So I thought, I got to find a job. So I had all my photography work hanging up in a gallery for our senior display. And this gentleman came by. His name was Tom Pangborn. Tom was an identical twin. He came and he looked at the photography work and he says, this is really good. I like your eye. I like your composition. What are you doing when you graduate? I said, I don't know. I don't have a job yet. He says, why don't you come work for me? And I thought, what do you do? And he says, we do aerial photography in the summertime, photographing sailboat races. During the week, we photograph golfers, sell it on speculation. And then in the wintertime, we do ski photography. And I thought, this is very exciting. He says, we also have a darkroom, so we process our own things. I said, I can do that. I did that a lot. So he hired me. Come to find out, Tom Pangborn was a Seventh-day Adventist pastor. I say was. He left the church a few years before, sold everything that he had that dealt with Adventism, thanks to a guy named Desmond Ford. So he was not keeping the Sabbath. He and his wife were both pilots. They would photograph on Sabbath. I would photograph on Sunday with Tom piloting the plane. We went out Labor Day weekend. I graduated from Andrews. Next week, I got married. The week after that, I started this job. Several months into it, 3 months into the job. Now, it's Labor Day weekend. We're heading out to the airport. It's kind of a gray day like this, but quite windy. I pick Tom up, we run to the airport. Now, how do you know it's windy when you get to the airport? You look at the windsock. If the windsock is just hanging there, is it windy? No, it's not. If the windsock is like this, it's a little breezy out there. If it's sticking straight out, it's windy. If it's not there, it's a hurricane. We got there and it was sticking straight out. And I said, Tom, you sure you want to go up? He rented a 172 Cessna for the summertime. He says, yeah, he was an optimist. Yes, let's go up. He says, you get the camera equipment, I'll fuel up and I'll do the pre-flight. Okay, so I took the camera equipment, loaded it up in the back seat. Anybody here a pilot? Anybody flown in a 172 Cessna?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so John, you know, it's tight. It's very, very tight. I'm seated on the right side of the plane, okay? Co-pilot, the pilot is on this side of the plane, to my left. If I go like this with my left hand, it's actually out the left window. That's how tight. It's like 4 feet in there. It's very tight. You think, try 2 people sleeping on a single bed. Can you do that comfortably? No. That's even wider than what this thing is. So we're inside the plane. The back, all my camera equipment. We take off. When those 3 little wheels left the ground, we were bouncing all over the place. Now, what's interesting is when you fly, actually I'm going to use this right here. When you fly in a plane, we were taking pictures of the sailboats. You don't just go like this, you're actually turning. Now, which side of the plane am I on? Right side. You know, we always bank which way? To the right. If we bank to the left, what am I photographing? Clouds. Clouds don't buy pictures, so we always photograph this way. Now, the Cessna is the choice plane of photographers because the wing is up high. You can photograph out without having to deal with a wing in your picture. The only thing you have to watch for is the strut that comes down to support the wing up. If you're okay with that and you can crop it out, that's good. Now, the other thing is the window. The window is not like a window in a car. Do you remember the good old days when you want your window down, you just crank at it and the window goes down? Not in a plane. In a plane, the window is actually hinged at the top and it hinges like this, it opens this way. But because it doesn't just fly open, there's a little hinge that stops it and you have to actually undo the hinge. So we would undo it, lift it all the way up to the bottom of the wing, then I'd put a wooden piece of dowel across it to keep it up. So now we can fly with it. and I can photograph out without photographing through a piece of plexiglass. We would come down. We came down to our first boat. It was a J-22 sailboat. It was a big sailboat regatta that they had set up. We came down from about 1,000 feet down to 400 or 500 feet. And as we came down, he started banking. And we would just do circles around these sailboats from about 400 or 500 feet. How do sailboats get their energy, their power? From wind. We're above them, creating a very strong turbulence in their wind. Do you think they like that? Not at all. We could hear them for 400 or 500 feet away yelling at us, "Get out of our wind!" So I'd have to be really quick. I'd photograph 10 shots or so. I was using a Pentax 6x7 camera. Anybody know what that? You remember what that is? It was a big thing where you had to actually crank it twice to advance the film. It was very wide body, big lens, 165 millimeter lens. So I'm photographing out with this. You have to be careful that you don't drop it, because if not, out it goes. And you're going sometimes, you know, if you're not photographing, you could be going up to about 75, 80 miles an hour. But when the window's open, we are going very slow. We're only going about 25, 30 miles an hour. That's it. And we would always bank to the right, around and round. Now remember, it was windy. So if the wind's coming from this direction, you're fighting the wind this way, it's pushing you, and then you're turning, now it's a headwind. Now it's pushing you from behind, and you're coming back the other way, it's pushing you from the tailwind. So it's a constant battle all the way around. We did the first boat, no problems. Second boat, no problem. Third boat, between the third and the fourth boat, Tom reached on the dashboard and he clicked a switch. I didn't know what that switch was, but that switch was to lower the flaps in the back, to drag the plane a little bit, not in the back, in the front, to drag it so that you can go even slower. They usually do that for landing, to slow you down. Had I known that, I would have just flipped it back up again. When we went to head to the fourth boat, the angle of our wings went from this to this. He stalled it. In aviation, when you make a paper airplane, if you wanted to glide through the air, you make it very wide. If you wanted to go fast, you make it narrow like a fighter jet. Here, we had no wind going over the wings. We lost what we call our lift, and we just dropped. Now, recently, a couple of years ago, I was visiting with one of the, for Amazing Facts, I'm considered a major gifts officer, so I deal with people who give money to the ministry. I was visiting a guy who is a pilot for Southwest Airlines, and he lives in Arkansas. So when I called him to say I was coming over, he said, "Pastor, which way are you coming, from the east or the west?" I said, "I'm coming from the east." He says, "Oh, okay, as you're coming through, I'm on the northwest side of the lake." He said, "Just meet me at the airport. I'll pick you up and fly you over." Oh, okay, no problem. So he flew over, picked me up, took off, just 5 minutes in the air, dropped down on the other side. Saved me a 30-minute drive all the way around. I was telling him about the plane accident that I had, and he says, "You know, I'm also a flight instructor. This is very easy to recover from." And he says, "Do you want me to show you?" And I thought, I didn't think about, "Do you want me to show you?" meant I'm going to do it. So all of a sudden we're flying, and I'm videotaping this, and he's flying like this, and he stalled it. My heart, my stomach started to come out of my mouth. And you know what? As fast as that happened, on the video, it was less than 2 seconds. He corrected for it and brought it back. It was that quick. But Tom was not as experienced as this flight instructor. So when he stalled it, we stalled it like this, went down, and we dropped. You ever seen osprey or pelicans dive into the water? What's the one thing they do before they hit the water? They fold their wings in. You can't do that with a Cessna, okay? The Cessna, it doesn't happen that way. We went straight into the water at over 100 miles an hour. According to this pilot, the donor who gives to Amazing Facts, he looked up the FAA report. He says, you probably were going about 100 miles an hour when you hit. And we hit straight in. Now, I'll tell you this. Let me give you a little bit of the layout of what goes on. In this setup here, this is a 172. I'm in the right seat. You notice I'm holding the window up. This is the wing right here. This is in the position when I slide my seat all the way back. Do you remember in the old days when, or maybe you still have them, you had to lift up, you slide the seat all the way back, and then you have to wiggle your butt around a little bit to lock it in place, right? If you don't lock it in place, you come to a stop sign, all of a sudden you slide forward, right? I didn't lock it in place. And in the impact, what happened was I bypassed all the locks because we were going so fast. My seat went from this position to that position. Notice from back here all the way to the middle of the frame. Now I'm 6'1", about 185 pounds in there, and just slammed right in. My left foot got crammed on this gauge here. This is a switch to change the tank from the wing, left wing to the right wing, vice versa. Now I'm getting a little bit ahead of the story here, so let me continue on with the story. We went straight into the lake. We went in over 100 miles an hour. The left wing was bent back 45 degrees, like that. And not only was it bent back, it also bent up. The door, pilot's door, popped open. If you notice on this side, all the windows are all gone. So when we crashed into the water, how much air pocket do you think we had inside the cockpit? We actually had nothing. But if you notice, my door was jammed shut. It was so tight, couldn't open it. People said, well, maybe there was the air wouldn't let you open it. I said, no, it wouldn't let me open it. Because in the impact, your life flashes before your eyes. Look, you just got this job, you just got married, you just graduated. And you're thinking, why is this happening? And then this thought hit me, really nice thought, get out. I went to lift the handle, not like a car, you pull it this way. In a Cessna, you lift the handle and then you push. I lifted the handle and I pushed. No go. It's not opening. A little bit of a panic. It's not going anywhere. I undid both the seatbelts. Now, in a Cessna, you have several choices of seatbelts. You can go no seatbelt. You can go lap belt. You can go shoulder belt. Or you can go do both of them. We just used the lap belt so that we had movement. When we crashed in there, I'm thinking, I've got to get out. The next thing I'm thinking, I've got to get out through the window. I remember the window's open. I got to get out through the window. But I'll tell you this, my friends. I don't remember going through the window. People said, well, maybe you blacked out. Maybe you lost consciousness. No, not at all. I can affirmatively say I did not lose consciousness because God designed our bodies a certain way. If you lose consciousness, your body goes into autopilot mode where you can still breathe. Your body just breathes automatically. If you're underwater, what tells your body, don't breathe, hold your breath? This is how many people die. Because they just suck in water, water gets in their lungs, and you're gone. I held my breath. All I'm saying is I'm inside the plane thinking I've got to get out. The next thing I know, I'm outside the plane. From inside, the next thing I know, I'm saying I've got to get out. I'm outside the plane. I'm pushing off with both feet on either side of the plane, and the wing is actually right here as I'm going up. I don't know which way's up. I wear contact lenses. My eyes are closed. Anybody here wear contact lenses? Can you swim with contacts? No. Contacts like water. The more water outside your eyes, the more they like it. They'll go away. So I naturally close my eyes. You don't know which way's up. I mean, if my eyes were open and I send some bubbles out, and the bubbles go that way, then that way must be up. I popped up to the surface of the water. I looked around, and I'm treading water now. I had a light jacket on. This is September up in northern Michigan. light jacket, jeans, running shoes. Try swimming like that. Not very easy. I looked around and I saw debris floating, plastic. I saw oil, saw gas. John, I saw my camera bag floating there. It's not supposed to float. My camera bag made it out somehow out of the back window, and it was floating there. And I'm telling people, get my camera bag. They're like, forget the camera bag, get in the boat. I'm standing there in the water. I see the sailboats, and I start swimming towards the sailboats. And I took about 10 strokes, and my body said, stop. I was in such excruciating pain. When you stop, you start sinking. And I'm here moving my right arm, I'm moving my right leg. It's not holding me up very well. I hear a small little motorboat. And these guys came flying by as fast as that little John boat with probably the little motor engine could carry them. Two brothers, one jumped in and grabbed a hold of me. The other one grabs my shoulders. And they're looking at me. And everybody's yelling from other boats and stuff like that. And all I'm hearing is, you remember watching Charlie Brown, how the adults speak? And I thought, I lost my hearing. I lost my hearing. And then I realized something. I looked up the guy holding my jacket. I said, can you do me a big favor? And he's like, yeah, what? I said, take my earplugs out. I forgot when we're flying in the plane, we have earplugs in there. He took them out and I thought, oh, praise God, I can hear. Ski boat came by. They got me into a ski boat. Now, I don't know how I climbed the ladder with one arm and one leg, but somehow I got into the ski boat. And when they flattened out one seat and I went to sit down, they were holding on to me. I went to sit down, and as I sat and was bending, my left knee, the pant leg of my left knee was torn, and as I knelt, it opened up, and I could see the bone of my left knee. And I thought, this is not good. So as I laid down, I moved my fingers. I was moving my fingers up, and I thought, praise the Lord, I can still play the piano. Because I thought I was going to lose my leg. They rushed me to the dock, waited 20 minutes, ambulance came. They took me to the trauma center. Anybody here EMT, paramedic, or anything like that? You are? Was. Okay. No offense, Jerry. But I thought paramedics and EMTs were the dumbest people in the world. I'll tell you why. Let me explain. Get in there. They say to me, what's your name? How old are you? Where do you live? I told them. Then they started working on me. 2 minutes later, Jerry, they come back to me and says, hey, what's your name? How old are you? Where do you live? I told them again. I didn't know that. So then, a couple minutes later, it's a long drive to the airport. He says, hey, what's your name? I stopped. Hey, look, buddy, can you get a piece of paper? Because your memory's not very good at all. I remember I told him that. I didn't know they're trying to make sure I'm alert. I thought he was a little... They rushed me to the trauma center. I get into the trauma center. They put me on a gurney. When the ambulance came, they had me on a gurney that I think was about 5 feet long. My head is hanging over, my legs are hanging over. My left foot is the size of a football. It is so swollen. You ever felt when you're like anything swollen? Those little hairs, I'm Asian, don't have a lot of hairs on my body, but when those hairs get very sensitive. And they put me on my right side against the wall. As people would walk by, my left foot would be there, and they would hit it with the clipboard or whatever, and I'm in a neck brace and I'm yelling, my foot, my foot. They're like, what? My foot! Doctors didn't know what was wrong. They brought in a portable x-ray machine. They started x-raying me, and finally they said, we need to get you in for surgery. I didn't know what was going on. There was an Adventist nurse there that we had thankfully met the day before. And I asked when we were driving there, I said, do you guys know Levi Woodard? They said, yeah, we know Levi. I said, could you call Levi to make sure he's there? Levi was just getting off his shift. They called him back in. My wife, we didn't know anybody. We just moved to Northern Michigan area. She calls his wife, Irene, who is also a nurse. And she starts crying because she didn't know which hospital they've taken because they gave two different conflicting hospitals. So Irene says, let's go check out this hospital, the one in our town first, because it's a trauma center. They get there just as Levi gets called back in. But when Levi gets the call, he hears that Tom called for him to come back in. He knew Tom as an ex-Adventist, but he thought, where's Alden? So when he saw Lynn and Irene, he said, just wait a second. Let me go in, make sure everything's okay. He walked in, saw me lying there, and he thought, okay. Came back out and says, let me clean him up, because I was totally covered in blood. Levi was there. He stitched up my forehead for me. Then they wheeled me into the operating room. And friends, I'll tell you, when I came out of that anesthesia, the doctor was sitting right next to me, the orthopedic doctor. He looked at me and he pointed his finger in my face. He says, are you awake? And I said, yeah. He said, son, I don't know whether you believe in God or not, but he's the one that saved you because you're supposed to be a dead man. Amen. He says, let me tell you what happened to you. He said, somehow in the impact, your left foot got crushed and you broke 4 bones right across your foot. They had to cut and recast me 5 times in 8 weeks because the swelling was so great. He said, you shattered 1/3 of your left kneecap. So I went in and I took all the broken pieces of cartilage out. I smoothed the edge to it. I drilled holes for a secondary tissue to come through, and then I stapled it shut. And he says, and you have a 50-50 shot with your knee. You may have problems as you get older with it. I will tell you this, in 2020, by God's grace, I took a sabbatical from ministry, and I cycled on my bike from San Diego all the way to St. Augustine, Florida. 40 days, 2,500 miles. I wanted to show not only do I preach the health message, but I live the health message as well. He also said that you broke your clavicle. I had a broken left clavicle. He said you have stitches up your head, and then he says you compress the L2 and L3 in your back, and then he said you completely broke your sternum, which bruised your heart. You're on open heart standby for 48 hours. We might have to go in and do surgery to bring your heart back into rhythmia. He says because it's not beating properly. Why? Think about this. We hit the water at how fast? 100 miles an hour. Do you know that a Porsche 911 can go from 0 to 60 miles an hour in just like 3.5 seconds? But to stop from 60 miles an hour, it takes it about 125 feet to stop. I was going 100 miles an hour and we stopped in 10 feet. Do you know how much inertia your body goes through? The steering yoke, just to give you an idea, here's what the steering yoke looked like in the plane itself. Let's see, where can I find the steering yoke? There's the steering yoke. Tom's steering yoke was bent down, and if you notice that little hole right there, that was my steering yoke. Completely broke it off with my chest. So that's why all the trauma. And then he said to me, you're going to be in the hospital for 30 days. Don't even think about getting out any sooner than that. Now, this was Sunday. On Monday, the Coast Guard diver went down to recover Tom's body. And through the microphone in his mask, he could talk to the Coast Guard up above, and he says, I found the plane, but I'm confused. He says that the pilot's door's open and the pilot's there. But you said that there was a survivor that got out. He said the door on the right side is closed and the window is too small. He said, how did he get out? He couldn't have gone between the pilot and the dashboard. There's no space. And they radio back and says, he went out the passenger side window. And that diver said, how big was this guy? They said 6'1", about 185 pounds. He says, no way. Impossible. The window is too small to get through. I will tell you this. Is anything too impossible for God? No. Nothing's impossible for God. Now, what's interesting is Tom's brother was a doctor himself and an identical twin. And he wanted to make sure that his brother didn't suffer and did the autopsy on his own brother to make sure that there was no water in his lungs. Because when he asked me, I said, I undid his seatbelt. He thought he undid his seatbelt, couldn't get out, and that's why he drowned. But when he did the autopsy, he found out that there was no water in his lungs. He died of massive head injuries because he went into the dashboard the same way I went into the dashboard. On Friday, it was Tom's funeral. It was a closed casket. I was in a wheelchair. My foot was sticking straight out. Where do you put somebody in a wheelchair? Right in the middle of the church. The casket was right here. It was closed. And I will tell you, I cried like I've never cried before because that should have been me. There's nothing in this world says that it shouldn't be. I should have died. And I realized I was living on borrowed time. God has extended much grace to me. I went back to the hospital room and I started yelling at God. What do you want? Just tell me what you want. You know, he doesn't answer like that, right?
That's right.
There was no answer, nothing. Doctor said 30 days in the hospital. I walked out of the hospital 8 days after the accident.
Amen.
This is the picture of me standing by the... If you notice closely, I'm wearing the '88 Olympics shirt for Seoul, Korea. Had the accident not happened, I had a pretty good chance of photographing the Olympics for Sports Illustrated. But you can see they actually first gave me a walker to walk on. And I looked at them and said, find something else. This is for old people. I'm not using that. So they gave me this. They had to set up a special contraption for my arm because of the broken clavicle. 8 days after the accident, I walked out of there. God didn't speak to me at all. He didn't say anything. That was September. By March, I get a phone call from the company that was supposed to hire me before, and they said, you know what? We've got an opening now. If you want to come and work selling pro camera equipment, the job's yours. Man, my wife and I packed up. We were out of northern Michigan. Within a few days, we moved down to the suburbs of Chicago, and I started my job there. My wife went back to her job at Hinsdale Hospital working as an operator in telecom. I started selling pro camera equipment. Now, to give you some idea, when I say pro camera equipment, this is anybody that did film. This is in the film days. I was selling pro camera equipment to them. From state police to every cruise liner you can think of, from Norwegian, Caribbean, Carnival, I was their go-to person. From the film, the camera equipment, the printers, the inks, the whole thing, chemicals, I was selling to all those people. From Walt Disney to the FBI. In fact, I was a consultant for the FBI and the CIA. They would call me to problem solve for them. When they had to do special assignments to be able to photograph certain things, they would call me and say, what do we use to be able to get this to work? The Navy would call me, and I outfitted battleships with lighting equipment so that when they hit the high seas, light stands don't fall over. Like these light stands, these camera stands, they would fall over. We would have special rail systems so they lock into place. I was selling to the Smithsonian. In fact, I was lecturing to the National Park Service in Washington, D.C. I was asked to go there and lecture. And back then, there was no such thing as Google. MapQuest wasn't even out back then. And so I didn't know where the National Building Museum was. I'm standing there, I'm right at the base of the Washington Monument, and I'm trying to find this building, and this lady was power walking coming by. I was in national accounts for the company at that time. 27, I was handling $20 million for the company. This lady walks by and it says, excuse me, can you tell me where the National Building Museum is? She says, yeah, I'm power walking right around there. She says, follow me. We start talking. I said, so what do you do? She said, I'm in purchasing for the photo department in the Smithsonian. Now, I just handled a huge contract with them on that. And I said to her, how do you like your 15 new enlargers? She looked at me, her eyes stopped. She stopped walking. She says, how do you know about that order? I said, I'm AJ. I fulfilled that order. She says, you're AJ? She says, would you like to see them? I said, yeah. So she took me 6 floors down below the Smithsonian and opened up this huge room that was bigger than this room with all the enlargers there. Then I eventually went to the National Building Museum, which is where the president has his galas, and I had the opportunity to share there. It was a fun job. I did a lot of very interesting things. I set up Harley-Davidson studio for them. In fact, I remember going there because there was a total eclipse happening during that time period. Then digital came out. I was the first digitally trained salesperson in the US. And in fact, I was a top salesperson that they sent me to Leica cameras in Germany for training. Now, doing sales demos, today you can go to Walmart and buy, you don't even buy digital cameras anymore. You just pick up your phone and use your phone. But back then, a digital camera was $36,000 for a pro camera. So I was doing a demo on them, and this guy came in, president of the company, doing the sales pitch with them, and he stops and he says, wait, you know photography, you know sales, you know digital, you know marketing. He says, why don't you come work for me? And I said to him, money talks. He hired me as the vice president of marketing for his company. We were handling Crane Chicago business. I was doing the work for Ace Hardware and World's Finest Chocolate. I was kind of partial towards World's Finest Chocolates. Because CB, the owner's son, would come in, we'd have to photograph mint meltaways, and he'd bring like a 10-pound bag of mint meltaways. You had to photograph the real product. You couldn't do mock-ups of plastic. It had to be the real thing. So you open 50 little chocolate things, and you find the perfect ones. You move them off to the side. It's like, so CB, what do you want to do with these? He says, oh, you can throw them away. No, can't throw that away. So it was a lot of fun. While I coveted that job because I was a vice president, went to sleep one night. It was Sabbath Friday night. Remember back in the early 90s, the waterbed was the big thing? And then you sit up in the bed and it feels like you're still moving around. I was a night person. I was up 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and I would, stay up late. 4 o'clock in the morning, I wake up, and I'm wide awake. I'm sitting in bed. I look at the clock radio, and it says 4:00, and I'm like, why am I up? And then out of nowhere is a voice that hits me in total surround. And it says, Alden, there's much work to be done, and the workers are few. I knew that was God. And I said, oh, no, you don't. You see, I asked you 7 years ago, but you didn't call me. I said, I'm a vice president. What does that mean to God? The next day, early Sunday morning, woke up again, 4:00 on the clock radio. And I hear God's voice calling me again, Alden, there's much work to be done, and the workers are few. I said, I can't quit my job. I found out something very important. Don't ever tell God you can't. Not in his vocabulary. I went from top salesperson, taking this company forward into the future, 2 weeks before Christmas that year. Well, let me back up. That was April. 2 years prior to that, the youth director, the youth pastor at the Hinsdale Church in Chicago, the largest church in Illinois Conference, it has the only youth pastor position. He comes to me and says, Alden, you need to be the youth leader. Let me train you. I think you do well. Okay? So I went in. He trained me for 2 years. Now, God spoke to me in April. The next month, May, Pastor Russ comes to me and says, You need to take over. I've accepted a call to go to Keene, Texas, to Southwestern. And I looked at him and says, I'm a vice president. Fast forward, December, 2 weeks before Christmas. The owner of the company comes in and says, Alden, I hate to do this to you, but I need to lay you off. I don't understand what's going on, but sales just dropped. I need to let you go. Right then and there, I went to Alger Keogh, who is the senior pastor at Hinsdale Church, and I said, Alger, I need to tell you what God told me. He stood up, little guy, stood up, he put his hand around the back of my neck, walked me down the stairs, pushed me into his car in the passenger seat, drove to the conference office, pulled me out, took me into the president's office and said, hire this guy. They had interviewed 50 people. They couldn't find a youth pastor. I was already there. Hire this guy. So they brought me on as an interim pastor for 8 months to wet my feet, and then I went to the seminary. When I went to the seminary, I need to tell you that I didn't want to go in with to get a master's of divinity. You know, that was for those people. I went in to learn youth ministry because no amount of Greek and Hebrew can deal with the situation that I had to deal with. When you have a kid that's got a gun to his head and he's ready to pull the trigger, no amount of Greek or Hebrew is going to tell you what to do. So I went in to understand the young people, how to work with young people, how to win young people. When I graduated from there, I got a call to go to Hendersonville, North Carolina, as the youth pastor over there. And then what's interesting is, when you do your Master's of Divinity, your ordination track is 3 to 5 years. When you do a Master's, Master of Arts, your ordination track is 5 to 7 years. So I was there serving as 3.5 years. Then the secretary of the conference called me and he said, Alden, there's an interest call for you to go to Conroe, Texas. He says, now he's an old German guy. He says, was not a good church, not a good conference. And he says, what are you going to do? I said, I need to go check it out. He says, you tell me. So as soon as I came back, he called me. He says, what are you going to do? I said, I don't understand, Ron, but I need to go there. Are you sure? Yes. He says, okay, we're going to ordain you before you leave. Because if we don't, they won't. I was 3.5 years out of seminary. They ordained me. Now, John, are you ordained? Was it a camp meeting ordination or did they come to your church?
Church.
Who came from the conference?
The president.
Just the president.
There probably were others too.
I don't know what was up with my ordination, but the president was there, the secretary, the treasurer, the ministerial director, the youth director, the associate youth director, and the union ministerial director. I must have been a very special case. I was ordained. In fact, they allowed me to bring in my own speaker. So I brought in Ken Corkum, who was the one that baptized me, and I wanted him to finish the whole thing off with the ordination. After that, I went to Texas, pastored for 1.5 years, and you know what? Pastor Ron Schmidt was right. They kicked me out. And at that point, I need to tell you something. When you're a pastor, it's not easy just to get up here and preach. You know, there are pastors that they use a lot of that type of thing. But that's the presentation. Working on the sermon takes a long time. I would sit at my computer Friday, nothing. All day, nothing. 1 paragraph by 5 p.m. 11 p.m., scrap that paragraph, start again. Nothing. I would get sick, literally, writing a sermon. When I went to Texas as a senior pastor, I realized God wanted me there because he wanted me to learn how to preach. And from there, the youth director called me to preach at a lot of youth events. Sermons were coming much faster. probably because my relationship with God was coming much faster. And then, when I got kicked out of there, I thought, I got so many calls to go preach, I'm going to start my own ministry. So we went back to Hinsdale. My wife got her old job back now as the director, and I started my own ministry. In 2004, I spoke for GYC, and once that hit 3ABN, I got calls to go all over the world to preach. Literally, I was hopping from one jet to another jet to another jet. I remember, I keep track of my sermons. And I remember in 2008, I think I preached 230 times that year. Then, of all things, Texas called me back. The ministerial director at that time, he was an associate with me in Houston, Texas when we were there. He texted me and he said, Alden, I need a strong pastor in Jefferson, Texas. Your name's been coming to my mind nonstop. Are you interested? I said, yes. Because the circumstances, all of a sudden, all my speaking appointments dried up. I was booked for a year. They all dried up. Didn't know what was going on. In fact, in 2012, December or November, I took a job as a seasonal UPS worker. Not because I needed the money. I just wanted to be able to share the faith with people. So while I had the browns on that I was wearing, I would have in my pocket all the tracts. So as I'm carrying packages through the apartment buildings, I would drop off the packages. On the way back, I would take the tracts and put them in the tracts. I need to tell you this one story. Came into a mechanic shop, old, rough mechanic. I called him a grumpy old mechanic. He was 74 at the time. And I came in with a little styrofoam box. And I thought those were Omaha steaks. So I came in, he said, hey, I got your steaks for you. He says, they ain't steaks. Okay. He says, put them on my desk. So I walked over all the way around the car, put it on his desk, came back. He says, it's not steaks, it's my insulin. I said, oh, type 1 or type 2? He says, type 2. I said, you know that's reversible, right? He's like, what? I said, see you tomorrow. Walked out. Came back the next day, another package. He says, hey, what do you mean it's reversible? I said, yeah, you can reverse it. I'll bring you some DVDs and you can watch it, Dr. Wes Youngberg. So I got the DVDs, brought him back to him the next day. I said, watch these. It'll change your life. He started watching them. And every time I came in, I always noticed Diet Coke, Diet Coke, Diet Coke. So I asked him, I said, hey, do you ever drink water? He says, no. I said to him, hey, when you go to the bathroom, is your pee yellow and does it stink? He says, yeah. Isn't yours? I said, no. What? See you tomorrow. Left. Through the whole thing, I was witnessing to this guy, sharing this guy. 3 years later, he was baptized. Now he's waiting in the grave for the trumpet call of the Lord. He was still running his shop at 83 years old. Through all this, I can tell you, God has been very merciful. I can't tell you how thrilled I am to be working for Amazing Facts, where we are on the cutting edge with ministry. Sorry, John, not 3ABN. But 3ABN does wonderful with TV. But we're doing printing. We're doing so many things with AI through all the different websites. You can go through and how many of you watched Armageddon?
Oh, yeah, that was good.
Did you see that? Did you see me in it? No, you have to look again. But when you go through some of like Prophecy Odyssey, you can go up to the top left, right corner, and you can pick different languages. You can get it translated to 15 different languages. Did you know that? You can send that to your friends and say, just pick your language. It was enough languages to cover 7 billion people in this world. As a photographer, I had the opportunity to photograph 3 general conference sessions. 2000 in Toronto, 2005 St. Louis, 2010 in Atlanta. I had the opportunity to rub shoulders with the Wilsons quite a bit. We had a good time laughing about a lot of different things. And you see this thing in his hand right there? I did ask him. I was curious. I said, hey, Ted, what are you going to do with that thing? It's some type of South American medieval thing. I said, what are you going to do with that thing? In that moment, somebody got his attention. He turned his head and he answered them. John, you're going to like this. Nancy leans over to me, grabs this weapon, and whispers in my ear, Alden, he needs to use this on the vice presidents. No joke. That's what he said. What she said. This picture that I had taken for the cover of Elder Wilson for the Adventist Review, this was 2010. A couple years ago, Nancy and Ted came to Amazing Facts to preach. Nancy walked by me, she grabbed my arm and says, Alden, that picture you took of Ted is still my most favorite picture of him. Going on safaris in South Africa, that's the setup we were using. I've had the privilege of doing many things in my life, but truly, the workers are few. In your Bibles, I'd like you to turn with me really quickly to Philippians chapter 3. Philippians chapter 3. Joshua, how much time do I have left? 5 minutes. That's prophetic time. Philippians chapter 3, verse 7. Paul writes this. Do you remember Paul's experience? He was a member of the Sanhedrin, was he? And then here, he's got a letter saying that he can basically take all these Jews, take them back. Paul says, but what things were gained to me, these I have counted loss for Christ. Yet indeed I count all things lost for the excellence of the knowledge of Christ Jesus my Lord, for whom I have suffered the loss of how much? All things. And I count them as? Rubbish. Some of you are in the New King James Version, rubbish. What does the King James Version say? Dung. Now, all of you are the old people here, but the young people, what is dung? It's poo-poo. Did you know that? Wait. Are you getting what Paul's saying here? Paul is saying, I count all things as poop. Some of us drive very lavish poop mobiles. We have to have designer poop attire. We furnish our house with high-end poop. Do you know what happens? In the end, it's all going to